Viking story most documentaries choose not to tell. In 865 AD, England faced something it had never seen before. Not a Viking raid, an invasion. Hundreds of longships appeared along the eastern coast. Thousands of warriors stepped onto English soil, but the most dangerous man among them never needed to fight. His name was Ivar the Boneless, and within a few years, entire English kingdoms would collapse before him. So the real question isn't how strong the Vikings were. It's how a man called Boneless helped break England itself. The death that started a war. According to the sagas, everything began with the death of Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar invaded England with too few men and was captured by Ælla of Northumbria. His execution became legend, thrown into a pit of snakes. Before dying, Ragnar supposedly spoke words that echoed across the Viking world. How the little pigs would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffered. Those little pigs were his sons, and among them, the most dangerous mind belonged to Ivar. Most Viking leaders would have answered Ragnar's death with a raid. Burn a village, kill a king, take silver, and leave. But Ivar had something much bigger in mind. Not revenge, conquest. The army that stayed. In 865 AD, a massive Viking force landed in East Anglia. English chronicles would later call it the Great Heathen Army. But something about this army was different. They didn't leave. Earlier Viking raids struck monasteries and vanished. But Ivar's army stayed. They demanded horses from the local king, turning themselves into a fast-moving force able to travel across England rapidly. Suddenly the Vikings could move faster than the Saxon armies, trying to stop them. England was no longer facing raiders. It was facing conquerors. England's hidden weakness. At the time, England wasn't a single kingdom. It was several rival states: Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, East Anglia, and many of them distrusted each other as much as they feared the Vikings. Ivar understood this perfectly. Instead of attacking the strongest kingdom, he waited for division. Northumbria was already in civil war. Two kings were fighting for control. So when the Vikings marched north, the kingdom was already weakened. The invasion had barely begun, and England was already helping destroy itself. The trap at York. In 866 AD, the Vikings captured the city of York. This was a major prize. York had Roman walls and strong defenses, but the Saxons quickly tried to take it back. Two rival kings united their armies and marched toward the city. They expected the Vikings to fight like raiders, wild, disorganized. But when the Saxons entered York in 867 AD, they walked into a trap. Viking warriors attacked from narrow streets and hidden positions. The Saxon army suddenly found itself surrounded. Chaos spread through the city. Both Saxon kings were killed, and the man responsible for Ragnar's death, King Ælla, was captured alive. The message of the Blood Eagle. What happened next became one of the darkest stories in Viking legend. Later sagas claim Ælla was executed using the Blood Eagle, a ritual where the ribs were cut and pulled outward like wings. Historians still debate whether the execution truly happened, but that debate almost misses the point. The Vikings wanted people to believe it had, and across England, they did. Fear spreads faster than armies, and Ivar understood that better than anyone. The Kingdom Breaker. After York fell, the Viking army moved again. Fast, unpredictable. Instead of fighting massive battles, Ivar targeted weakness. Strike quickly, take resources, force kingdoms to react. Northumbria collapsed. Then the Vikings turned toward East Anglia. Its king, Edmund the Martyr, refused to submit. He was captured and executed. Later, Christian tradition would remember him as Saint Edmund, but for the Vikings, it meant another kingdom had fallen, and the army kept moving. But who exactly was directing all of this? Because the deeper historians look at Ivar, the stranger his story becomes. The mystery of the Boneless King. Unlike many Viking leaders, Ivar is rarely described personally fighting in battle. Instead, he appears in the sources as something different: a commander, a strategist, a mind directing the army, which raises the mystery behind his name. Why was he called boneless? Some historians believe the name referred to a medical condition. Others think it meant extraordinary flexibility. But there is another interpretation, that boneless meant someone impossible to break. Not physically, but mentally. I think it's the third one. Because once you accept that idea, everything Ivar did in England stops looking like instinct and starts looking like a master plan. The king who would resist. But there was one kingdom that refused to collapse: Wessex. And its young ruler would become the most dangerous enemy the Vikings ever faced. His name was Alfred the Great. At the time, Alfred was not yet the legendary king history remembers. He was young, inexperienced, and facing an army that had already shattered most of England. But Alfred understood something many Saxon kings had failed to grasp. The Vikings were not just raiders. They were settlers, which meant defeating them would require something England had never built before: a kingdom strong enough to survive the Viking Age. But that moment was still coming, because in the 860s, England was still falling. The mind behind the conquest. Most people imagine Viking warfare as chaos, axes, rage, brutality. But Ivar proved something very different. Victory didn't come from strength alone. It came from understanding the enemy, using their divisions, moving faster, choosing the right moment to strike. In other words, strategy, which may be why Ivar the Boneless became one of the most dangerous figures of the Viking Age. Because he didn't just raid England, he understood it. And once he did, he began to dismantle it, kingdom by kingdom. England eventually survived the Viking invasions, but it never forgot the moment everything changed: the arrival of the Great Heathen Army and the strategy of the man who helped lead it. If this is the kind of history you don't usually hear about, there's more where this came from. So here's the question historians still argue about. Was Ivar the Boneless the most dangerous Viking of them all, or simply the smartest? And one question historians still debate: without Alfred, which English kingdom survives? Drop your answer below. I read every one. Because the men who came after him, the ones who finished what Ivar started, are even less well known. That story is next.